The night he died, I buried a pair of shoes under our bed because I couldn't bear to see the scuffs he left from racing to fix every broken thing. A week later, I dreamed the laces tied themselves and walked away. I followed them into the dark, through the hallway, past the photos where we're laughing with our eyes closed. The house in the dream felt colder than the morgue had. Somewhere, a faucet dripped like a metronome counting down. Then he spoke. "Out," he whispered. Not angry, just urgent. "Now." I woke with my heart thudding against the inside of my ribs like it wanted out too. The room tasted like metal. I grabbed my coat and keys and left, barefoot, because in the dream my feet were already moving. Outside, the streetlight made the frost glow like ground glass. I stood there on the sidewalk, shivering, staring at our little blue house with the porch he painted last spring, when the world still held us carefully. The windows were dark, so quiet I could hear the wires hum. Then the sound changed, a muffled tick, another. A smell, sweet at first, then sick, then sharp. Gas. It crept out of the vents like a rumour. My throat tightened. I dialed 911 with fingers that didn't feel like mine, told the operator my address, told her I was alone. Headlights slid by and didn't slow. The night kept its secrets. I wanted to run to the neighbour's door and bang and scream, but my voice wouldn't come. I waited, counting breaths, until the siren curled around the corner and a fire truck exhaled in front of me like a dragon at rest. Firefighters moved fast. Masks, axes, the heavy grace of practiced fear. They kept me back while they opened the house like a tin can. I watched our life split open. The porch light flickered once, like a final blink. A woman from the crew asked if there was anyone else inside. I shook my head and swallowed the ache of saying no. Being alone is a truth that tastes different every time. They found the leak, a hairline crack in the basement pipe. The chief said if I'd stayed asleep, the morning might have found me forever. He didn't say, lucky. He didn't need to. He looked at me like he knew there was more to it. After they left, the house shook with silence. I stood at the threshold and didn't go in. The door felt like the edge of a cliff. I kept seeing his hands in my mind, the way he'd cup my face to steady it, as if sadness were a tremor we could brace for. I spent the rest of the night in my car with the engine off, wrapped in the coat he used to steal when he couldn't find his own. Dawn came grey and thin. The birds began fussing like they always do, as if survival is just a habit you practice until it sticks. When the gas company cleared me, I went back in. Every room held him like a breath I couldn't release. The kitchen, where he burned pancakes and said, "Char adds character." The living room, where his guitar leaned and waited for a chord that wouldn't come. The bed too neat now. The space beside me flat and cold. On the floor, under the frame, the shoes I'd hidden had moved. They weren't where I left them. A few inches forward, toes angled toward the door. I told myself I was mistaken. Grief rearranges things. Memory is a bad witness. But under the bed, dust wrote a quiet truth. 2 half moons where the shoes used to rest. Fresh prints leading outward. I pressed my thumb into one mark until I sneezed and laughed, the kind of laugh that splits and leaks. That night I tried to sleep with the windows cracked. Every whisper of the curtain sounded like his voice. I thought about how he used to hum when he worked. Nothing in particular, just a low thread that stitched the house together. I tried to hum, softly, to see if the walls remembered. "Out," came again. Not from the dream this time, but from the memory of his mouth against my hair. It wasn't a warning now. It was a compass. Out of the numbness. Out of the rooms that turned pain into wallpaper. I took a pen and wrote his name on a sticky note and put it on the front door. Not to call him back, to mark where I would step through every day and keep stepping. I told the note, "I heard you." That afternoon I made a list. Call the counsellor, fix the pipe, box the winter clothes, donate the guitar to the school. No, not yet. Keep the shoes where they are. Let them point. When the sun slid down, the house breathed differently. I brewed tea and imagined telling him about the leak, the sirens, the way my hands shook, the way they settled. I pictured his face when he'd realised he saved me, again, from a danger he couldn't see when he was alive. I carried the steaming cup to the porch and watched the street. The world looked ordinary, which is what makes it holy when it refuses to let you die. A child rode by on a bike with a loose chain. The chain skipped, caught, kept turning. I leaned against the rail he painted, the blue chipped by weather and keys and time, and I felt the smallest push in the centre of my back. Not enough to move me, just enough to say, "You're still here." I whispered his name into the cold. It drifted up, barely visible, and then it was gone. I didn't chase it. I stood there and let the night hold me, and for a moment I held it back. Morning made the house look innocent again, like a child caught mid-prank. Sunlight thinned the shadows, but it didn't warm them. I made coffee and poured it down the sink. My hands didn't trust cups yet. The pipe hiss haunted the quiet, like a memory with teeth. At the door, the sticky note with his name had curled at the edges. I pressed it flat, the way I used to smooth his collar. The shoes under the bed kept their angle toward the door. I told myself they were a map I'd decided to follow. On my way to work, the car radio cut to static, and then a voice that wasn't on any station said, "Listen." I switched it off and drove in silence, counting streetlights like the rosary I never learned. At each red, I checked the mirrors. Back home at lunch, a small box waited on the porch. No return address, just my name, written like someone was trembling or cold. Inside, tucked in tissue like something fragile and wrong, lay his old flip phone I hadn't seen since before the wedding. It still had the dent from the time it fell off the roof while he was hanging lights, laughing with the nails in his mouth. I pressed power. The screen stuttered awake, a ghost remembering its body. One new voicemail, dated the night before he died. I sat on the steps and pressed play. His breath came first, quick, like he'd been running. Then his voice, steady, on purpose. "Hey baby, if you get this, don't go back inside. Call the gas company. And there's more. Check the blue toolbox, crawl space." The message ended in a scrape and a muffled word I couldn't catch. The porch seemed to tilt. My heart did too, differently. He knew. Not just about the danger, but something else he didn't get to finish saying. The unfinished part stung worse than the warning. I went to the garage. The blue toolbox sat under a shelf of paint cans and spiderwebs that glittered like cheap jewellery in the light. The latches were stiff. Inside, on top of wrenches he'd wiped but never fully cleaned, lay an envelope with my name and a smudge of blue. Inside the envelope, cash folded in half, a small key with 217 stamped into it, and a receipt from a storage facility across town. On the receipt, his handwriting, "If anything happens, tell Ellie." The name hurt because I hadn't called my sister in months, grief building fences. Under the envelope, a photo, burned along one edge. The flame stopped where his thumb must have pinched it out. Our porch was in the picture. In the photo, taped under the rail, a small black square, a camera, not ours. I looked up at the actual rail and saw fresh paint. He'd repainted this spot last spring. I'd helped, handing him the brush, laughing about the neighbour's cat judging us from the fence. He'd painted over something, and he'd found something. My stomach went hollow, like the house was missing a wall I'd leaned on. I ran my fingers along the underside of the rail. The metal edge of dried tape scratched me. A tiny wire brushed my skin and quivered. I pulled a small camera free and nearly dropped it when the lens caught the sun and blinked. Someone had been watching us, watching me. I thought about the leak again, about hairline cracks and lucky timing, and the way fear pretends to be random when it's actually a plan. Back inside, I put the camera on the table and stared until it began to look like a beetle. I wanted to crush it. I didn't. The phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number, local. I didn't answer. It buzzed again, left a voicemail that sounded like breathing and traffic. I called Ellie. Her voice came through sleepy and worried, and when I said his name, she woke all the way up without meaning to. "Come stay with me," she said. "Pack a bag. Take what you need." I told her about the camera, the pipe, the phone, the key. Ellie went quiet in that way she does when she's choosing between anger and fear. "Take photos of everything, then leave. I'm coming." I told her no. The word felt strange, like borrowing shoes that weren't mine. If someone planted that camera, they'll notice if we panic. She exhaled. "Then do one thing for me. Sleep at my place tonight. You can come back tomorrow in daylight and be brave." I promised. Some promises are scaffolding. They don't fix a building, but they let you reach the damage without falling. I photographed the camera, the toolbox, the receipt, the key. I saved the voicemail onto 3 different drives because superstition is just practical grief. Before leaving, I taped a fresh note to the door. "I heard you. I'm going. I'll come back with help." I signed my name. On the porch, the air tasted like rain, but the sky was a stubborn blue. A sedan I didn't recognize idled at the corner too long. The driver didn't look at me. That's how you know you're being watched. People who don't look at you are looking the hardest. I slid the phone into my coat, pocket heavy with the key. The shoes in the bedroom upstairs pointed toward the door, patient as saints. At Ellie's, I slept on the couch and woke to the scent of her cinnamon candle and the sound of her grinding coffee like a dare. We made a plan, with toast crumbs on our hands. Storage unit first, then the gas company again, then a locksmith for the back door. I didn't tell her about the dream voice that felt like fingers at my spine. I didn't have to. She kept touching my shoulder anyway. At a red light on the way to the facility, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. "Don't open it." I stared until the light turned green and the car behind us honked. Ellie drove. I typed back with a calm I pretended to own. "Who is this?" No answer. Just the 3 dots that mean a heart is trying to speak and can't trust itself, and then nothing at all. The storage lot crouched behind a grocery store, rows of metal doors like teeth. A man in a baseball cap slid a clipboard toward me without smiling. Unit 217 sat near the back. The key turned smooth, like it had been waiting. The door rolled up with a sound like tearing fabric. The light flickered on, reluctant. Inside, a neat rectangle of my husband's caution. Labelled boxes, a tarp, a plastic bin with our wedding programs, and in the far corner, a crate, marked with his handwriting I'd recognise in the dark. "Do not open alone." My hands shook. Ellie's didn't. She put hers over mine and said, "Then we won't." I smiled like a bruise and nodded. I could feel him in that metal room, the shape of his care tightening around me like a belt in a storm. Could feel danger, too. Behind us, A footstep stopped where the aisle met our row. Quiet held its breath again, waiting to see if I would. Ellie's hand tightened around the edge of the crate, and I felt her pulse jump under her skin like a trapped moth. The footstep in the aisle didn't come closer. It just remained there, a weight in the air, a presence that made every hair on my arms stand up and lean away. I tried to tell myself it was the manager doing rounds, but I knew the sound of someone pretending not to breathe. Grief taught me the pitch of silence. Fear taught me the rest. "Keep your back to me," Ellie whispered. Her voice was small and sharp, the sound a needle makes when it finds the right place to stitch. I moved so I could face the unit door, while she lifted the top of the crate an inch at a time, just enough to break the vacuum of dust and secrets. The metal door of our unit rattled in its tracks as a gust slid down the row, and the footstep vanished, the way a dream does when the alarm wins. Inside the crate there was another box. Of course there was. My husband had built a habit of layers. "Onion man," he used to say with a grin. "Peel me carefully." This box was fireproof, the kind you buy when you love your family more than you believe in luck. A small lock held it closed. The key on my ring was not small, was not for this. But keys teach you patience. I checked the crate again, my hands working ahead of my mind, and there it was, taped under the lip. A tiny brass key, like an earring. The lock turned with a sound like a throat cleared before a confession. Ellie and I looked at each other, and even our fear agreed to stand still a second. Inside the fireproof box, a spiral notebook with the first pages torn out, a slim flash drive wrapped in blue painter's tape, and a cloth bundle tied with twine. The bundle had weight, heavy enough to matter, light enough to hide. I loosened the twine and folded the cloth back to find a small camera, the same make as the one from the porch, but newer, cleaner, like a twin that never got caught. Beneath it, a list of dates and times in his handwriting. The earliest started 6 months before he died. The latest stopped 3 days prior to the funeral. Each date had a location: porch, alley, kitchen window, side gate. And next to some of them a single word: black sedan. "Who?" Ellie asked. Her voice wasn't whispering anymore. I loved her for that. Fear hates a voice that won't bow. "The night he fell off the roof," I said, the memory coming teeth first. "He said a car slowed. He laughed it off. I hadn't thought it was anything. We were busy being in love. You can't see a storm while you're arguing with the sun." I slid the flash drive into my pocket. The notebook I opened with reverence like a church door after years. The first complete page had a sentence at the top. "If you're reading this, it means I didn't stop it." Underneath, notes. Lines drawn between names I didn't recognise. Arrows and question marks, and one phrase circled hard enough to tear the paper. "Gas contractor, no permit." My chest felt small. He was tracking someone, maybe a company, maybe a person. "The leak wasn't a leak," I said, and the words shook in the air like a sign over a highway in wind. Ellie put her hands on my shoulders, steadying me the way he used to when my mind ran ahead and left my body behind. The footstep returned, closer now, unashamed. A shadow stretched under the roll-up door like a stain moving. Ellie's mouth tilted toward fight, mine toward run. Before either could win, a voice spoke, low and male, the kind of calm that pretends to be polite until it needs to break you. "Problem with the lock?" he asked. I yanked the door up another foot and stepped into the aisle, slipping the notebook back into the crate with the flash drive, leaving the camera out where my hand could find it. The man wore the facilities cap, but no name tag. His shoes were clean, too clean for storage dust. He smiled with eyes that did not. "We're good," I said, and aimed my voice at casual. It bounced off metal and came back to me thinner. Ellie lifted a random box like it was all we came for. "Just grabbing wedding stuff," she added. It was true enough to sound like truth. He nodded. "You'll want to keep the door down while you're in there," he said. "People wander." The word people did a lot of work. He waited a second longer than courtesy needed, as if memorising our faces from an angle, then walked on, his steps light for a man his size. At the end of the row he turned left. I didn't hear a door open. I didn't hear anything at all for too long. "Finish fast," Ellie said. "Then go. I'll close up and meet you at the car." We didn't argue with the new division of labour. She knows how to distract a fox. I know how to run with eggs. I took the flash drive, the notebook, the second camera, and as I reached to close the fireproof lid, I saw a folded paper stuck in the corner groove. It was a printout of an email thread. The subject line read, "Inspection reschedule." The dates matched his notes. The sender had a familiar last name, the gas company's inspector who never showed. I knew her from the voicemail I left in the night. And there, in the CC line, a private address that matched one scribbled in my husband's circle of suspects. He had been writing me a map with breadcrumbs he knew the wind would try to take. We rolled the unit door down and snapped the lock. My hands remembered the weight of the small brass key and wished it could open the whole world. The man in the cap was not in the office when we returned the clipboard. No one was. A television glowed behind the smudged glass, volume up just enough to make the shape of words without the meaning. In the car, I slid the flash drive into my laptop. Ellie watched the lot in the mirrors, like a hawk pretending to be a sparrow. The drive held a single folder named 217. Inside, videos. Porch, alley, kitchen window. Clips that started quiet and stayed quiet until you paid attention. A black sedan passed, then again, then again. At 2:13 a.m. on a Wednesday, empty street. At 2:17, the sedan rolled by with its lights off. At 2:19, the side gate camera caught a shape stooping, rising, slipping away. The last clip had a face for half a second, a jaw, a scar, an old anger. "Pause," Ellie said. I did. We looked at the frozen face together, and my body knew it before my mind gave it a name. The plumber who'd done a routine check 2 months before the funeral, the one who called me Mom and smiled like an apology, the one who wore a company shirt with a logo I couldn't place. Now, not exactly, like a word on the tip of my tongue that tasted like iron. "Home," Ellie said. "Not your house, mine. We gather, we plan, we breathe." The way she said breathe made it sound like a job. It was. I drove with both hands tight at 10 and 2, like a student with a cop behind her. Every car in the mirror had a black coat. Every face at a red light might have been a scar I knew. When my phone buzzed again, I put it face down on my thigh and let it hum itself still. Whoever was on the other end could wait for once. At Ellie's table, we spread the notebook, printed the email, copied clips to 3 drives, and wrote down the scar, the jaw, the partial plate we could make out frame by frame. We circled the names, drew lines, added our own arrows. I could hear him in my head, humming his nothing tune while he problem-solved in the margins of our life. When we finished, the house felt smaller, but we felt bigger. Fear still sat with us, but it had to scoot to make room for purpose. I put the second camera on the windowsill facing the street. I thought about putting one at my house too, but the thought of crossing that threshold alone made my bones feel like glass. That night, sleep walked the perimeter of the room and didn't come inside. I lay there, listening to Ellie breathe, and to the fridge click, and to the world's small moving parts. And somewhere between one breath and the next, I heard him again, my late husband, close to my ear, without the cold of a dream. "You're doing it," he said. Not praise, not a plea, a fact. Then softer, "Don't go back alone." I opened my eyes into the dark and whispered to the ceiling, which held, like an oath, "I won't." Morning found us crouched over the notebook again, circling the same names as if pressure could squeeze answers from ink. Ellie brewed coffee strong enough to peel paint. I sipped and watched the street through the second camera's preview on my laptop. A thin slice of outside, the way a peephole lets you trust a door for 1 second at a time. The black sedan didn't pass, but an old pickup slowed twice, as if it had misplaced something invisible. When it moved on, the knot in my chest didn't. I called the inspector's office from the email printout. A receptionist answered with a voice that sounded laminated. She said the inspector, Ms. H, was out on site. I asked for a call back. I left my number, as if numbers were shields. 5 minutes later, my phone rang from an unknown. I let it go to voicemail. The transcript wrote itself on the screen. "This is Ms. H, returning your call." I played it. The voice was wrong. It wore her name like a mask. "Call from a different phone," Ellie said. Her eyes were the colour of a locked door. She handed me her cell. I dialed the inspector's office again and asked for Ms. H, like I had the first time, casual as a lie. When the woman came on, her voice was human now, weary, irritated, real. She hadn't called me back. She didn't know my name. She did know the contractor badge numbers for the last 6 months and the rules for re-inspection when a leak is found. She recited them the way people recite commandments to keep themselves from breaking. I asked for the badge number of the plumber who came 2 months ago. I gave her the date. She checked. She paused. "No appointment that day," she said. "No one from us in your area that week." Her breath found the phone. If someone told you they were with the gas company, they weren't. I thanked her, then sat very still, because stillness makes thoughts louder. The scar, the jaw, the smile like an apology. He had been in my house with a lie on his shirt. He had stood in my kitchen and called me Mom and set a clock I almost didn't hear. The storage clips had caught him outside. My memory had caught him inside. Together they made a shape the police might recognise, if the police cared, if the police weren't tired of grief that talks like evidence. Ellie tapped the table to pull me back. "We go official," she said. "We bring it all, and we bring a copy of the copy of the copy." I wanted to be braver than I felt. I wanted to be the woman in movies who walks into a precinct with a folder that changes the ending. Instead, I was a widow with shaky hands and a camera that had seen too much. At the station, the desk sergeant looked like everyone else who'd learned not to catch other people's pain. He took our statement and our printouts and the flash drive copy and said a detective would call. I watched him label an evidence bag. The label was crooked. The crookedness comforted me. Machines fail in straight lines. Humans fail in angles and try again. Back at Ellie's, the house felt wrong at the corners. We checked the back door and the side windows, and the garage for tape residue, for a lens, for anything that looked like a bug waiting to hatch. We found nothing. Still, when the dryer clicked on, I jumped. When Ellie dropped a spoon, my heart shed feathers. My phone buzzed with a text. A photo of my house, taken from the street, night dark. My porch light off. The caption, "Miss you." The number was different again. I showed Ellie. Rage moved across her face like weather. "We don't spook," she said. "We set traps." We bought a cheap door sensor and a pack of motion lights from the hardware store that smells like pine and metal memories. We put the sensor on Ellie's back door, the lights under the eaves. The second camera in the window pointed at the street and angled just so that it could see the sidewalk but not the neighbour's driveway. We printed the scarred face from the storage clip and taped it inside a kitchen cabinet where it could stare at me every time I reached for a glass. Fear meet familiarity. Familiarity, dull the blade. The detective called just before dark. He said his name like a promise he might keep. He had watched the clips. He had questions. He asked if my husband had mentioned threats. I told him about the voicemail, about the crate, about the email reschedule with the private address in the CC line. He grunted in a way that meant interest or indigestion. "Forward that," he said, "and don't go back to your house alone." The line clicked. For once, advice matched the dead. Night draped itself over the block, heavy and slow. We kept the lamps low and the blinds down. Ellie made soup that tasted like a place where bad things can't enter. We ate standing up because chairs felt too permanent. The camera's preview glowed on the counter like a small second moon. At 11:07, the motion lights blinked on outside. We froze. The preview showed an empty street, then a shadow that wasn't a person so much as the idea of one slipping past the edge of the frame. We held our breath like it could make us smaller. The door sensor stayed quiet. The shadow didn't knock. The preview stayed empty until it felt like a dare. I exhaled first. Ellie exhaled after, like choreography. "Tomorrow," she said, "we visit the private email's owner. Daylight, public place, 2 cars. I nodded because plans keep monsters out of closets, even if only until morning. At 2:19 a.m, the phone on the counter shuddered with a new voicemail. I didn't touch it. My whole body turned into an ear. When I pressed play, breath met breath in the small speaker, then a whisper. "You're not safe there either." The voice wasn't my husband's. It wasn't the fake inspector's. It belonged to a man who knew the shape of my fear and wanted to measure it. I deleted the message and then emptied the deleted folder and then checked the settings to make sure recently deleted meant gone. It doesn't, not really. Nothing leaves. Everything turns into shadow until you turn the right light on. The detective texted at dawn, 2 words. "Meet 9? We said yes and arrived early because time feels useful when you can be ahead of it. He met us with a printout of the scarred face, blurred and enhanced and still itself. "Name," he said, and wrote one. It matched none in the notebook. It did match the private email's owner by a syllable, the kind of small family tie people keep quiet at work. He asked if my husband had enemies. I said love had made us boring. He asked if I'd noticed the same sedan at different places, different times. I said yes, and that the word sedan sounded too neat for what it held. He nodded, like he'd had that thought before, in 1,000 smaller tragedies that never made the news. We left with instructions, and a promise to call before we did anything stupid. Stupid meant brave without a witness. We could manage that. On the ride back, Ellie drove the long way to see if the sedan would follow a loop it didn't expect. It didn't. A white van did for 2 turns. Then we let it pass, and it did. At noon, sunshine pretended to be answer enough. We went to the cafe tied to the private email's domain, a place with chalkboard menus and the clean hum of expensive coffee. We sat where everyone could see us, and where we could see the door. The owner came out with a smile that tried too hard to be ordinary. When he saw the printout of the scarred face on our table, his smile dropped like a plate. "His cousin," Ellie whispered, the way a bead of sweat whispers down a glass. I didn't answer. I watched the owner's eyes flick to the corners, to the camera in the ceiling, to the door, to the seat where his wife stood last week in the inspector's email thread, asking about invoice dates. The map in my husband's notebook flared in my mind, lines bright as wire. I said his name, the one the detective had written. The owner's hands tightened on the tray. "We're closed," he said, though we weren't. The room filled with the kind of quiet that happens before something breaks or someone talks. The owner set the tray down like it weighed guilt. Cups rattled. He slipped his towel into his apron and gave us a smile that didn't reach the eyes he couldn't decide where to rest. Behind him, beans cracked in the roaster like far-off fireworks. "We're closed," he said again, softer, rehearsed. The chalkboard menu insisted otherwise. People at 2 other tables glanced up, then down. the way strangers do when they smell trouble and want to believe it's just the soup. Ellie slid the printout closer to him. The scarred jaw stared up from cheap paper, still dangerous. "Your cousin?" she asked. Not a question, more a touch with a glove on. "He came to my sister's house 2 months ago wearing the wrong logo." His hands found the counter and clung. A vein worked at his temple like a trapped blue thread. "You should leave," he said. "This isn't—" He cut himself off when the bell over the door chimed, and a woman entered with a stroller, wind-bright, unknowing. He smiled at her automatically. It almost fit. "We'll go," I said, "after you answer one thing. Why did he put a camera under my porch? And who told him my husband was asking questions?"
I kept my voice low. Rage likes an echo. I didn't want one. The owner's eyes flicked to the ceiling camera, then to the back hallway where a bead curtain trembled like nerves. "No one told him," he said, and the truth slumped out like a man off a long shift. "He noticed. He notices everything, that's the problem." Ellie leaned closer, elbows on the table like a friend. "What do you notice?" she asked him, gently. "Anything that would matter if the police asked?" He swallowed. The roaster cracked again. "He works side jobs," he said. "Gas, plumbing, electrical. For cash. For people who don't want receipts. He puts his own sticker over real companies' logos. He says inspectors are lazy. He says no one checks." My mouth tasted like nickels. "And the cameras?" "He does that too," the owner whispered, ashamed of the family song he couldn't stop humming. "Says it's to keep an eye on his work, to catch thieves, but sometimes—" He glanced at the stroller woman, then back at us. "Sometimes he knows too much about who's home and who's not." "And my husband?" I asked. The word husband still chipped on the way out, rough and blessed. "Why him?" The owner looked at the printout the way people look at altars they've stopped believing in. "Your husband came here after hours, asked about permits. He wasn't angry, he was curious. He left his number. I told him not to poke. My cousin heard. He has ears like doors," he exhaled. "I didn't think—" The bell chimed again. A man walked in a facility cap. My ribs recognised the cadence of his steps before my eyes did. Scarred jaw, old anger, new smile. He saw the printout on our table and stopped just inside the door as if the air had become a wall. Ellie's hand found mine under the table, bones to bones. The room shrank. The owner went very still and then moved the way a man moves who has been practicing this moment in his nightmares. He stepped in front of us like a shield built too late. "Closed," he told his cousin, voice steel now. The man's smile didn't stain. He flicked his eyes to me, to Ellie, to the door. He took 1 step forward, then 2 back, as if the geometry of the room had betrayed him. "We'll talk later," he said to his cousin, but it was a promise to us. He left. The bell tinkled innocent. The owner sagged like a puppet whose strings got cut. "You should go," he said, panicked now. He won't let this go." He scribbled an address on a napkin with a hand that shook. "His workshop. You didn't get it from me." We walked out into a daylight that hurt. The block was busy, but every face felt like a mask waiting to scowl. Ellie scanned the street with the same look she gives storms. "He didn't want to make a scene," she said. "He'd rather we be alone." "Then we don't give him alone," I said. I texted the detective the address. He replied with one word: "Wait." It felt like a bandage trying to be a wall. We didn't wait. Grief gives you a taste for stupid bravery. We drove 2 cars, stayed in sight, parked a block away, and walked like we were going to a thrift store with good lighting. The address led to a warehouse behind an auto body shop that smelled like heat and missing paint. The side door was propped with a brick. I touched it and felt warmth like a hand that had just left. Inside, the workshop was neat in a way that wasn't clean.
tools lined up like soldiers with secrets. On the far wall, a pegboard held rows of fake logos: gas, electric, water. Names that meant safety, pretending to keep you safe. A rolling toolbox sat open like a mouth. Beside it, a laptop blinked awake at our shadow, screensaver dying. Ellie lifted the lid. Folders bloomed. Streets, addresses, license plates, clips from porches like mine, clips from kitchens, clips that made my skin go inside out. "Don't touch," I whispered, already touching. I plugged in our spare drive and dragged the folders over, because you don't walk past a fire without grabbing the baby if you can. A floorboard creaked behind us. The door had not made a sound. I turned and there he was, scarred jaw, cap tilted, smile gone. He held no tool in his hands, which scared me more than if he had. Empty hands mean will. "You should have stayed small," he said conversationally, like a waiter warning about the fish. His eyes moved past me to Ellie, to the laptop, to the drive eating his trophies. He didn't hurry. Men like him think time is a pet. "Your cousin thinks you don't know your own limits," Ellie said. The line was useless bravery, glitter without a gun. He looked at her like she'd mispronounced a word he owned. "My cousin thinks coffee makes him virtuous," he said. He took a step. I took one back and bumped the table. The laptop hiccuped. The transfer bar lagged, greedy and slow. "Why the gas?" I asked, stalling, trying to make my voice a net. "Why me? Why any of us?" He shrugged. "People sell faster when they smell danger," he said. "People move when they're watched. Houses go cheap. Flips pay." He smiled again, that apology without remorse. "Widows move fastest." The word widow cut where I already bled, but it also cauterized. A heat rose in me that had nothing to do with fear. "He warned me," I said, and the room seemed to tilt toward those words. "You didn't plan on that." The cousin looked past me, and for the first time his certainty cracked. He tilted his head like listening to a thing I couldn't hear. Maybe it was just the hum of the lights. Maybe it was my husband humming in my ear again, that nothing tune that stitches. The laptop chimed. Transfer complete. I snapped the drive free and slipped it into my pocket. The cousin saw the move and lunged the way a snake does when it forgets to be elegant. Ellie grabbed the rolling toolbox and shoved. Metal met shin. He grunted, stumbled, hit the pegboard. Logos rattled like lies in a windstorm. I ran. Not out the door, he was between us and escape, but toward the back where a loading bay let in a rectangle of light and a rectangle of hope. He followed, breath close, footsteps closer. The bay door was half raised. I slid under, scraped my shoulder, came up in the alley gasping and alive. Ellie dove after. The cousin's hand snatched at her ankle and missed. He slithered under, furious now, all pretense gone. Behind him, someone shouted my name. Not the cousin, not Ellie. The detective, finally, sprinting from a black, unmarked car, gun drawn like a letter opener for a sealed fate. The cousin froze like a man who had never agreed to be caught. The detective didn't freeze. He moved like training, like math, like every wrong night made into posture. "Hands," he said. "Now." The cousin lifted them slowly, palms up, a magician showing the trick. "You?" He smiled, like a man reading a joke only he understood. The detective didn't blink. The alley held its breath. A delivery truck idled at the curb, diesel humming like a bad thought. Somewhere a bottle rolled and hit a drain with a hollow ping. Ellie's grip on my arm found bone and asked it not to shake. The cousin's eyes slid to the road, past the detective, to a dark SUV where a passenger watched with the quiet of someone who owns outcomes. The window was cracked. A hand rested on the door like a promise. The detective saw it too, his jaw set. He didn't turn his head. You don't feed a vulture with fear. On your knees, he said. The cousin laughed softly, then dropped anyway, part theatre, part threat. He laced his fingers atop his head, like the world was a hat he wore. Everything you think you have, he said to me, will go missing by morning. Not this, I said, and tapped my coat where the drive warmed against my ribs like a tame heartbeat. He saw the gesture, and his smile cleaned itself into something sharp. Power had been comfortable in his mouth. He didn't like the taste of almost losing. The detective moved in, cuffed him with hands that didn't shake. He read the rights like a prayer he'd said too often and still believed. The SUV door opened. A man in a suit stepped out, not hurrying, not sweating, wearing a ring that gleamed like a small sun. He flashed a badge I hadn't seen before and said words about jurisdiction that sounded like curtains being drawn. The detective didn't flinch. "Get in line," he said. 2 patrol cars turned the corner then, sirens sleeping, lights awake. Timing can be a friend if you make it wait long enough. The suited man's smile thinned. He gestured to his driver and retreated, the SUV swallowing him like a trick with no applause. They put the cousin in the back of a cruiser, head ducked, body chewing its own pride. He looked at me through the glass and mouthed a sentence I couldn't hear, then smiled. Again, smaller now, like a mask that had been washed too hot. The cruiser pulled away. The detective stayed. He looked tired in a way that wasn't about sleep. "You brought me the kind of mess that stains," he said. It almost sounded like thanks. He took the drive from my shaking hand, then stopped, then pressed it back. "Make me a copy of the copy," he said. And I understood. Some truths disappear in official rooms, some survive in kitchen drawers. We gave statements against a wall that smelled like old rain. Ellie did the talking when my voice took the long way around a sentence. The detective wrote clean block letters, the kind you wish had addressed your childhood. When we finished, he said, "Don't go home," like a benediction. He didn't promise safety, he promised company. At Ellie's, the house exhaled and made space for shock. We sat on the floor with our backs to the couch, like kids during a thunderstorm, counting the distance between flash and sound. Across from us, the printout of the scar on the cabinet door looked less like a threat and more like an index of what we'd survived. I slept with one eye open, the way animals do when the grass lies wrong. Near dawn, I dreamed of my husband, not as a voice this time, but as a pair of hands setting tools out in a neat line, measuring twice, cutting once, making sure I had what I needed to finish. When I woke, the room was soft with grey, and Ellie was already moving with coffee like a liturgy. The detective called at 9. The cousin had a lawyer before breakfast, an expensive one who wore other people's fear like aftershave, but the laptop from the workshop had been booked clean before anyone could wipe it. The fake logos, the addresses, the porch clips, the invoice trail. Enough to make a fence tremble. "It will take time," he said, and time is just another word for work. We made more copies. We gave one to a reporter who had the kind of eyes that know how to keep a source alive. We gave one to the inspector, who hadn't called me back and now called every hour with updates like bricks. We gave one to the owner at the cafe, who cried once, fast, when I told him he could stop pretending family meant loyalty to the worst parts of yourself. I went home with the detective and Ellie and 2 uniformed officers and the son leaning on our shoulders. The house had been entered, not ransacked, careful, drawers closed, frames straight. It's unsettling to find your life exactly where you left it when you know hands have been inside it. On the nightstand, the sticky note with his name lay face down. I didn't put it that way. We swept the place like a dance you learn from a patient teacher. The detective found a pinhole in a vent where a lens had blinked. He unscrewed it, bagged it, looked at me like acknowledgement is its own kind of apology. He watched, he said. I nodded. I lived. In the bedroom, the shoes had moved again. Not much, just enough to say, still pointing. I sat on the floor and touched the laces. They felt like rope and memory. I know, I told them. I'm going. When I stood, my legs remembered how. We changed the locks and the codes and the story the house told about who it belonged to. Ellie opened the windows and let the wind argue with the curtains until the rooms rearranged themselves into something habitable. The detective stood on the porch and called a list of people whose names carried the weight of doing things right when no one was watching. The funeral had not given me closure. The case wouldn't either. Closure is a myth sold to people who want receipts for their grief. What I got was steadiness. What I got was a line to step over, and another, each small crossing an oath. I slept that night in my own bed with a bag packed and my shoes by the door, and no apology for either. In the morning, the neighbourhood learned our names. Not the gossip version, the truth version. People came with casseroles and stories of strange vans and wrong logos and men who smiled too much. Fear loosened its jaw when it realised it wasn't the only mouth in the room. Weeks stretched. Hearings scheduled and rescheduled like reluctant trains. The cousin tried to look smaller in court and couldn't. The suited man pretended to be no one at all until the reporter turned a camera into a mirror and he saw himself and flinched. The inspector's office rewrote a protocol like a prayer made practical. The detective sent a text that said simply, "Good start." At dusk, I sat on the porch he painted and watched the street earn its quiet. I kept the shoes under the bed, still angled toward the door. Not as relics now, but as a compass I could finally hold without shaking. Sometimes I heard him hum. Sometimes I didn't. Both felt like a kind of mercy. I don't believe the dead fix the living. I believe they hand us little tools and hope we learn how to use them. He gave me one word: out. I walked it into a life that could hold me. I walked it into a warning for neighbours and a folder of evidence and a stubborn kind of hope. I walked it until it turned into another word I hadn't expected to speak without breaking.